Welcome to Module 5, Tick Bite Prevention. We'll talk about methods and what to do with an encountered tick. First, we'll start off by briefly discussing how ticks detect their host, or in this case, people, pets, or livestock. From there, we'll cover the chemical methods of tick bite prevention, as well as the behavioral methods that can be recommended to pet owners, as well as humans. Finally, we'll discuss what happens if these prevention methods fail and you still encounter a tick. Ticks find their hosts using two predominant strategies, but are not exclusively bound by one or the other. The first is called the ambush method and is what you are observing when you see ticks questing from the top of vegetation, with legs outstretched, waiting for an animal to pass by. The black-legged or deer tick is a good example of a common tick that frequently uses this strategy. The second major method is by actively hunting down the host. Ticks that use this strategy detect host pheromones, or the version of pheromones for arthropods, and use carbon dioxide to move toward a potential host to make contact. Lone Star ticks are notorious for this type of aggressive host acquisition. You might be wondering, so how do I prevent these bloodsuckers from biting me? You can't rely on any single method to prevent a tick bite, so a multi-pronged approach is the only way to go, and here are some of the most important things that you can do. The first and foremost is frequent tick checks. We often talk about tucking pants into socks, and that's a great thing to do, but no method is foolproof, and it is why frequent tick checks are the most important to conduct to detect any tick that may have attached to your body or is crawling around. You need to make them a habit. Looking in and around the hair and around the ears, under the arms, inside the belly button, around the waist, between the legs, and the back of the knees are great places to check for ticks because these are where they often are found hiding. Pet owners are actually more at risk for tick bites and tick-borne disease than people who don't own pets. That's because pets can bring ticks indoors, and while ticks won't live for very long in our dry environments, there's a period of time where they can still bite other people in the house. So to check for ticks on pets, it's often a good idea to check in around the ears, the eyelids, under the collar, under the front legs, between the toes, between the back legs, and around the tail. These are often very common places where ticks are found hiding on animals. 2. Avoid tick habitat as much as possible. A second behavioral tick bite prevention strategy is to avoid walking or hiking in prime tick habitat. This doesn't mean to avoid natural outdoor spaces altogether, but to stick to maintained trails when with a pet or walking with other people. Ticks prefer the edges where they can easily seek hosts that are passing by, but also retreat to the dark, humid spaces where they need to rehydrate. If pets or humans for that matter must walk through the edge of vegetation, instruct pet owners or other people walking through these areas to do thorough tick checks before heading home, and then once again when at home. Number 3 is to maintain a tick-unfriendly yard. A third strategy to prevent tick bites is to control potential exposures at home. Backyards that have deer or other wildlife frequenting them pose a risk for ticks establishing in the yard. Landscapes that feature ornamental plants, rock walls, wood piles, bird feeders, and woodsy edges all increase that risk. Pet owners should consider pet-safe, targeted pesticide treatments from a licensed pesticide applicator if they find their yard to be a source of tick encounters. If people are not comfortable with large-scale pesticide usage, other methods like tick tubes to target the larval and nymphal infestations on mice, deer exclusion fencing, or simply maintaining the landscape can go a long way to keep a yard less habitable for ticks. You must wear an effective tick repellent, and the key word here is effective. It's important to use EPA-registered repellents in order to prevent tick bites. But why? So here we have a breakdown of EPA-registered versus unregistered / what you may know as minimum risk. So EPA-registered repellents mean that the product and the active ingredient have been evaluated for human safety and effectiveness and determined to be safe for use when used according to the product label. You may see this particular emblem on those types of products. However, unregistered or minimum risk products are not tested in the same way. So based on previous studies, the active ingredient in the product has been deemed a minimal risk to human health and exempted from needing EPA registration. But it doesn't mean that it was evaluated for effectiveness. It just means that it will not harm whoever is using it. So many of these are essential oils that are not formulated into repellents. Pure essential oils such as rosemary, tea tree, citronella, lemon oil, and eucalyptus oil are not recommended for use as repellents because, one, they quickly evaporate, which leaves you defenseless, and they can cause significant eye and lung irritation. If you prefer an essential oil repellent product, we recommend one that has been properly formulated into an EPA-registered repellent to ensure both proper safety and effectiveness. And an example of this is oil of lemon eucalyptus, otherwise known as PMD. Generally, the higher the active ingredient in percentage, it means the longer the duration of the repellency, but usually not by very much. For example, a 10% DEET product will provide roughly 2 hours of repellency, while a 24% DEET product will provide an average of 5 hours of protection. Studies demonstrate that DEET concentrations that are higher than 50% offer no additional protection. DEET is the gold standard of insect repellents, and it's been widely available on the market since around 1957. It's the most widely used repellent because it's effective against several species of biting flies like mosquitoes and black flies. However, as far as a tick repellent, it's considerably less effective. For example, in field trials, a 33% formulation of DEET lotion applied to military uniforms was only 19.1% effective at repelling nymphal black-legged ticks, and only 50% effective against adult American dog ticks and Lone Star ticks. It's more effective at repelling larval ticks, but this is not the stage that's going to be carrying disease that can be transmitted to humans or pets. It is recommended not to use higher than 30% DEET on children, and do not use DEET on children under the age of 2 months because of what can be absorbed into the skin. There is something now called lipo-DEET, the second line on this chart. It's a newer, long-lasting formulation of DEET. It was developed in the 90s, and it actually prevents the DEET molecules from being absorbed into the skin. They're actually absorbed at a 10 times lower rate than regular DEET spray. In lab studies, a single application of a 20% lipo-DEET product resulted in nearly 10 times fewer ticks attached at 24 hours, and was also effective at reducing American dog tick attachment. While DEET is an excellent mosquito repellent, lipo-DEET appears to be a superior product because it is highly effective at repelling ticks as well, and this is probably because less is getting absorbed into the skin, so more is there present to protect you and act as a barrier. The next highly effective repellent is something called permethrin. It's a synthetic fabric and clothing treatment that's designed from a natural insecticide in the chrysanthemum flower, and it's highly effective at killing ticks on contact, but demonstrates much less repellent activity than DEET or picaridin. Studies found that clothing treated with 0.5% permethrin provided 100% protection against all stages of deer tick and both adult and nymphal American dog ticks and Lone Star ticks. True repellency wears off quickly, but the fabric treated with permethrin will kill ticks on contact for weeks, even after several launderings. Permethrin products should not be applied to skin, not because it's dangerous, but because it's not effective unless on a fabric where it can attach. And it can also cause a little bit of skin irritation before drying. One thing to note about permethrin is that cats are particularly sensitive to this repellent, so do not spray it around them or let them touch the clothing that it has been treated with before it has dried. Once it is dried, it is safe to cats. Another type of repellent that is highly effective is in a class called piperidines. Picaridin is one of these. It's a synthetic natural insecticide derived from pepper plants that is more effective against Lone Star ticks than DEET, greater than 90% effective after 5 hours versus less than 60% effective, which is DEET. It's less repellent than DEET against black-legged ticks, though. So if you're in an area where you're dealing with more Lone Star ticks, picaridin may be a better choice for you. A specific formulation called SS220 or Morpol 220, used at a 20% concentration, was found in several studies to provide excellent protection against American dog ticks, Lone Star ticks, and black-legged ticks. However, a higher concentration is needed to protect more against black-legged ticks. Picaridin is a specific type of this piperidine that we talked about. It is very low toxicity, it doesn't trigger skin sensitivity, and it appears to be effective against Lone Star ticks. And there are also cream variations that can provide additional repellency time, 100% repellency for 12 hours in some cases. Something called IR3535 is a biopesticide that is similar to a naturally occurring amino acid insecticide, and it's available in lotions, aerosol, pump formulations. On average, it's more effective against black-legged ticks than DEET or PMD, and it only works as a contact repellent, meaning that the ticks would have to touch the body part to be repelled. So it doesn't have that repellency that permethrin would necessarily have, or DEET. Oil of lemon eucalyptus, or a PMD, is a synthetic formulation of the essential oil from the Australian lemon-scented gum tree. And depending on the product, this repellent appears to prevent tick attachment, but does not prevent loose and wandering ticks from crawling on a treated person, so it does not have repellency. True repellency is higher in products that contain a mixture of the synthetic version of PMD and the pure essential oil, sometimes known as MYGA, M-Y-G-G-A. But this product is not recommended to be used on children under the age of 3 because of that essential oil that can cause both skin and lung irritation. And finally, the last line of this chart, BioUD, is a biopesticide derived from a natural insecticide found in the wild tomato plant leaves. It has the lowest rated toxicity by the EPA, and most tests of this repellent are lab-based, so the effectiveness in the field has yet to be determined. However, on treatable filter paper and cheesecloth studies, BioUD was comparable to nearly 100% DEET against American dog ticks and Lone Star ticks, and demonstrated 2.5 hours of protection against American dog ticks when applied to skin. It is significantly more repellent than PMD. So this chart is to show you all the different types of repellents that are EPA registered and that could meet your potential need depending on what types of ticks you have in your area, what level of comfortability you have with DEET products. If you opt for something a little bit more along the natural spectrum, you have synthetic ones, which just means that it's formulated in a way that it's not going to evaporate immediately upon exposure to air or sunlight. What about your pet, you might be asking? So similarly to EPA registered products, we also encourage people to avoid what are called natural products for pets for the same reason. They are not tested for efficacy, and being less effective, they can leave your pet at risk, as well as the humans in the household, because ticks will come in on the pets. So it's important to discuss with your vet the right product for your pet and to use it all year round. Ticks can be active throughout the year, as we talked about in the life cycles. Black-legged ticks specifically are active in the winter, and it's important to know this if your pet is going to be going outside. So there are different types of skin applications and collars. There are monthly reapplications that go between the shoulder blades all the way down to the tail. There is something called a Seresto collar, which lasts up to 8 months. It's odorless, very safe around children. It's a great product. And then there are also chewable products. If your pet tends to have sensitive skin and you don't want to put something on their skin, or you don't want anyone in the house touching what might be on them, you can give neck scars, Simparica. Those are monthly dosages. And then there is something called Brevecto, which is once every 12 weeks. But it is important to talk to your vet about which is best for your pet and your pet's particular needs, but to consider using these all year round. And so again, not every tick prevention method is foolproof. So you still may encounter a tick after even doing all of these different things. The important thing is to not panic about it and always have at your disposal somewhere pointy tweezers. That is because these are the safest ways to remove a tick from skin. The risk of a tick-borne illness increases with the length of attachment, so you want to get that tick off as quickly as possible. And the best way to do that is to grab the tick as close to the skin where it's attached as possible and pull straight up and out. It is important to not apply any kinds of substances to that attached tick, like petroleum jelly, matches, rubbing alcohol, nail polish remover. You've seen maybe some videos online of people using dish soap. Lots and lots and lots of methods people suggest, but the thought is by suffocating the tick with some kind of substance, it will potentially regurgitate more of its saliva into your body as it's trying to pull itself out. And that could end up with you having more exposure to whatever pathogens this tick may have inside of itself. So always important to wash the wound site after you've removed that tick, and make sure that you keep an eye on the bite site for any kind of rashes or infection that could be happening. It's also really important to save the tick. Many people just want to get rid of it as quickly as possible, but if you are not sure what type of tick species it is, or you are thinking you might want to have it tested to see what kinds of pathogens it may have been carrying, you want to take that tick and put it in a sealable baggie so it can't escape. Label that bag with who the tick was on, what was the date you found it, and where approximately do you think it came from. You can put it in the freezer, which will kill it, and that will allow you to have it available for any kind of future identification if an illness does occur, or potentially for testing. But the CDC actually does not recommend testing ticks because the presence of a pathogen or a disease in that tick doesn't necessarily mean you've been infected with it if it hadn't been feeding for very long. You also could have been bitten by another tick that you didn't find and gotten sick from another tick that wasn't the one you removed. So the infection in the tick doesn't necessarily mean that you've been infected. And if the tick is free from infection, it also doesn't necessarily mean that you are free from infection, because you were in an area where one tick happened, you could have gotten bitten by another one that was infected. So now what do you do? Well, you can have that tick identified by taking a photo of it and submitting that to the Tick app, which is an application you can get on your smartphone, either on Google or at the Apple App Store. This is a collaboration between the Illinois Tick Inventory Collaboration Survey and the Midwest Center for Excellence in Vector-Borne Disease. You will receive an identification of your tick photo along with some more prevention information about what to do. And this is actually a study that's been ongoing for several years, trying to get an understanding of where ticks are, who's encountering them, and what behavioral aspects are contributing to tick encounters. So you've been bitten by a tick, you report it, you find out what it is, you can monitor for symptoms. Do you develop a fever, rash, abnormal headaches, or are you generally just feeling not well? It's a good idea to go see your doctor. Rashes sometimes look typical like this. This is the very classic Lyme disease bullseye rash, but doesn't always look like that. Southern tick-associated rash illness is not Lyme disease, but it appears it has a similar rash to Lyme disease, and that can also cause an illness that is very uncomfortable. Rocky Mountain spotted fever rash is more of a spotted fever, as it's called, that shows up on the arms and the legs. And this is actually a potentially very deadly disease if it is not treated and you're not on antibiotics within 5 days of developing this rash. So any type of abnormal symptoms show up, signs, it's important to go to your doctor and tell them you were bitten by a tick, the type of tick it was, and potentially how long that tick was feeding. That will give your physician, your medical provider, a sense of what potentially you could be dealing with. It's also important to document with photos any rashes at the bite site or any rashes that show up on your body, because sometimes those rashes disappear by the time you get to the doctors. Often tick bites also get very irritated at the bite site, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're infected with a tick-borne disease. It could be a localized infection, or it could just be your immune reaction to the tick saliva proteins. So still really good to get an idea of what it could be by taking photos and keeping an eye on it, but just because a rash shows up, it also doesn't necessarily mean that you are infected with a tick-borne illness. So 5 key takeaways from this module are that it's important to be familiar with the common tick species in your area and their active seasons. It's very important to use effective repellent and protection on both people and your pets. It's important to make frequent tick checks a habit when you are spending time in the outdoors. Make sure to remove attached ticks immediately and safely with pointy tweezers. And it is critical to save that tick. If you need some other resources or want to look up more information, or go to the EPA Repellent Finder, which allows you to choose the right repellent to fit your needs, here are some links for you.